Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Hesse vlog right here on the Geek Apocalypse YouTube channel. First of all, I should say, I have not done a vlog in a while. That's been due to the fact that we went to MCM London, where we spoke to Danny John Jules and a bunch of other people who I'm going to name drop, such as Nolan North, who did the rather great thing of doing the introduction to the podcast, which is fairly awesome, as well as did a podcast after MCM London talking to John Kavalak of Munchkin fame, which is kind of cool. And if you haven't heard of Munchkin, where have you been for the last 10 years? Or probably longer, actually, come to think of it. Sorry, Steve Jackson. But anywho, as the blog posts or vlog title indicates, I'm going to be talking about why games matter. Because if you ever listen to any mainstream radio shows or anything like that, they'll say that games do not matter. And ironically, I am recording this using the software for Twitch, which is a video gaming network. So, you know, it all comes around in the end. But in terms of, I just wanted to talk briefly about how games matter to me and in general in society, why I think they matter and should be appreciated. And obviously they've gotten better over the time frame I've been alive. I mean, I'm 28, and the idea of, I don't look 28, is maybe in a good or bad way, I'm not sure. But one of the great things about video games is that when I first started, it was the arcade era. So what was so phenomenally great about this, I know Will Wheaton talks about this idea. The great thing about arcade games is you'd have to actually go to an arcade to actually play games using, like, you know, remember the time when you used to do 10p pieces or wherever country you're from, where you have to put a coin in to play a game, and that idea seems baffling to kids now who can get it on multiple gadgets and consoles. Well, that was the way it used to be. So one of the great things that would teach you in society, unfortunately, is not being taught to several kids now, is that you would have to behave in said arcade. Otherwise, the penalty for misbehaving or being a dick to someone would be thrown out of said arcade. So the very thing you'd want to do, aka playing a game, would be taken from you. The problem we have now when kids talk to people on devices with headphones and various other things is not only are they playing games that are not for their age level, and that's a parental problem, but also they're not being punished for behaving a certain way. So you know they've not got a good moral example to deal with. Whereas in towards the beginning of my life, and like my brother and sister's generation, that was the penalty, was the other members of society and the people running the arcades would throw kids out, and the only way they would learn the correct behaviour is to be punished for the very thing they'd want to do. That's something that we don't do enough of, but that's an entirely separate point to the thing I'm talking about. So, why do people get into games in the first place? Well, there's several reasons, and obviously from that point on to now, we've had varying degrees of the way people portray video games. It was regarded as the niche thing or the uncool thing for geeks and nerds who can't get girls. And granted, some of that may be true, but the thing I'm getting at is that the reason it's become popular now is realizing that they're very similar to films, in the sense that you can portray and fulfill a fantasy as if you're playing it, as if you're in the game. Like, you look, for example, like a game like, I don't know, let's take something like Uncharted, where you get to play Nathan Drake, which is kind of like the male version of Tomb Raider, where you get to be a treasure hunter, going around looking for treasure, or like sort of Indiana Jones, I guess is the probably better way of comparing a very well-known film franchise, which started in the 80s, the arcade era. So you get to play a role as yourself. And one of the things I think is imperative now, which I think's added to the popularity of games, is the idea of you can make a character, the main character that's in the game that you're playing, look like you, and again, you know, dispel the disbelief of that you're actually playing that game and you are that person. Or granted, I wish I had big tits and was Tomb Raider, but we all can't have it our own way, boys and girls. But anyway, yeah, so it's moved on a great deal of time. But you then got to the console era, which was my sort of era. As I say, I was born in 87, so it was just Commodore 64, and then it led to Mega Drive, SNES. So that was kind of my grown-up period, and I had a Mega Drive. And the reason that my podcast, Geek Apocalypse Podcast, available at geekapocalypse.com, is that, and I should have just went at that and then put .com, is that one of the huge advantages was that you could play it at home. So the reason that my intro to my podcast, which I was getting at, is Toe Jam and Earl, because that was the first game that my parents allowed me to play. And the reason that was because for those who don't know what Toe Jam and Earl is, Toe Jam and Earl was a game. The two main characters, Toe Jam and Earl, who are aliens. Toe Jam is a red, three-legged alien with a back cap, kind of wrapped style, and Earl is this overweight guy with hearts on his underwear, and he was like half naked. They were both kind of half naked, which I've only just realized that now. That's kind of a little bit disconcerting, but yes. It sounds ridiculous, but there are aliens that have crash landed on Earth, or their ships crash landed on Earth, and their parts are all over like different parts of Earth. So you've got to go to different areas and find the parts, and you get to find presents that like do certain things. You get to rob Santa Claus, which I thought being a kid was the greatest thing ever. And really, I'm serious, you do get to rob Santa Claus, and Santa Claus flies around and you got to sneak up to him and steal his bag of presents, which I'm sure there'll be some kids going, I really wish that was true and possible, because I would totally do that, especially if you get some crap stuff for Christmas. I'm sorry if that's the case. But one of the things that that was that was the reason my family allowed it, because it was fairly not that violent, and it gave me the opportunity to play with my brother and sister, because I have two older siblings, an older brother and an older sister. In particular, my brother, I used to play that game all the time. So that had a really massive impact on me, because it's still in my top 10 list of my favorite games I've ever played, because it's so ridiculously fun. It's straightforward. It's not plot based, but it's insanely fun, and that was something the arcade area in particular is insanely known for. This idea of you can play a game that's entirely addictive, entirely fun, but has no real storyline or structure. It's just the idea of beating the game. You know, that famous thing of there used to be games, I shit you not, where if you got over 100, the game would reset and you would start again, because the idea is they just wanted to keep playing it. I shit you not. There'll be some kids who are going, that's outrageous, but sadly that's true. And some of them were insanely hard as well. And actually, growing up in my era, and I know they've kind of done this, I think Devil May Cry maybe is an example of this, where Japanese exports used to be, Japanese games were insanely harder than European ones or American ones. So whenever you got a Japanese export and would play a game, it would be virtually impossible for a pretty hardcore European gamer to play and, complete it, because Japanese and Asian games were significantly harder, because they just, I don't know, maybe had a bigger culture for games at that particular time, and maybe they still do now, who knows, but obviously it's still popular and whatnot. But yeah, that was just very, very funny to get a game and just go, I can't complete this. What are the Japanese? They must be trained like samurais to play video games. But there you go. Actually, a brief note, my friend found the original version of Castlevania, which goes for quite a good amount of money. The English translated version, Castlevania, is made by the same guy who made Metal Gear, Shinji Kojima, is it? If I hope I'm saying that right. But anywho, so video games are a great example of that, especially in the arcade era. One of the things that it led to, and is happening in multiplayer games, I say, unfortunately, the etiquette and the politeness and all that other stuff is missing in today's world, because it's a smokescreen, because you can't actually see the person. But one of the cool things about the arcade era is it would bring people together. Like I just mentioned with my brother, we get to play Toe Jam and Earl, and me and my brother are 4 years apart, so so getting the opportunity to do that was fun. That's a good example of bringing people together. Another form of games, because it says why do games matter, so I'm not going to just stick to video games, is board games. I am a huge board game fan. I've been a board game fan all my life. I played card games and board games with my family. You know, the regular ones like Go for Broke and Monopoly. And Go for Broke was a game where you won by losing your money. The worst idea for a board game I think I've ever heard. It still is on my hate list of board games, to be honest with you. But anyway, the great thing, my Christmas, for example, is inundated with memories growing up of playing card games and video games and board games. Board games and card games in particular with my family was like a social event, and the video games was like a two-player experience with me and my brother, or an uncle if my uncle was a pro. Or I remember fondly going to my aunties and uncles and playing FIFA like 96 on the PC with my cousin Mark, and again, a bonding experience because he was a very shy person, but we had the opportunity to play something we both enjoyed. So it gets people out of their shyness and puts them in a situation where they're comfortable, and an opportunity to get to know people more, which is something I've experienced in particular with board games. The whole time I've played board games, it is a very sociable, great experience in that sense, especially if it's around people you don't know. It's a very good icebreaker. I'm fortunate in the sense of I'm chatty and over the top chatty, some would say, that it gives me the opportunity just to allow them to get to know me, and it really does work. As I've maintained to people, about 90% of my social network now is around people who I met through playing board games. How I ended up pursuing that further was I would lend games at university, games like Munchkin, which I just mentioned, which led me to get a wider scope of people at university. Because can you imagine what other industry, video games and board games, have this similarity, where you can play a game with someone who's 16 and play with someone who's 60? You know, Call of Duty, for example, I know there's like 16-year-olds play that game, and a 50-year-old can play that game, and you can play online with them, and you're having the same experience. That's very, very rare. You know, you can, because you're literally acting out something the same way. You know, in this, and you're literally involved in it. It's, you know, it's a similar experience to obviously watching a film together, but you can have varying degrees of reactions then, because you can interpret things differently. Whereas it's a lot closer, because the choices and stuff that you make within a game, your friend or that person and you are the reason that the game reacts that way. You know, the film's already like predetermined, like wrestling. So that is brilliantly fun, because it leads to, you know, as I said, the opportunity to talk to someone you may never have met in your life, because the scope is that you can talk to someone at 50 years old because you have the common interest of playing a board game. Playing the board game is what you like, but the board game is the criteria of getting like-minded, fun people together to talk. More and more as I go to my board game club, for example, the board game is secondary to the fun of meeting, of seeing the same people again, or a new person walks in and we introduce them to the game, and I love that aspect of it. It's one of the funnest parts about doing it. So that matters in the sense of, especially when technology is getting as wide as it is, and all the procrastinating stuff with watching things. You know, for example, I watch a lot of television shows, and the ones that I do, it's a very solo thing. You know, I don't watch it with any other people. I'm not seeing anyone at the minute, so it's kind of like a solo thing. And obviously, if I did end up seeing someone, I would include said person in that if that's what she wanted. But the great thing about board games is it gives you the opportunity to do that. It gives you the opportunity to get to meet someone who's a stranger and show them the game and increase your social circle, which is always good, because it not only is it like-minded people, but like nice, kind, friendly people that you meet in particular with board games. But video games give you an experience like no other, because they actually immerse you in the game. Obviously, a board game's quite a passive experience, because you've got, especially if you're playing it live, it's a sort of thing. And obviously, you know, it's worth saying that, you know, apps in particular, like, you know, I like a game called Lords of Waterdeep, which you can have as an app, and you can, you know, there are obviously, you know, crossovers in this sense that the board games are becoming video games to some degree, because you can get them in gadget form. But one of the things I think video games, the experience, the immersion of playing a game, like for example, I'm obsessed with Dragon Age Inquisition because I actually feel like the Inquisition. I feel like the Inquisitor, or whatever they call them, the Herald of Adronsde or whatever it is. I feel like the leader of that group because I'm sold on the fantasy world and the character creation, and it's easily one of the best games I've played in quite a long time. I think it's phenomenal, and that's a fantastic example of why that is awesome, because you wouldn't get, imagine, like Dara O'Brien says, you go into a film and it is based on how good you are at said game, whether you see the ending or the conclusion of a game. Imagine if that was a film that you paid to go to a cinema, and it was all based on, you couldn't see the end of the film, so you're 50 minutes in and it stops the game and you have to do, he has a puzzle, you have to work out this puzzle to see the rest of the film. It doesn't quite work like that, but it one of the things that gaming can teach you, and you can transfer this into everyday life. I know Chris Hardwick in his book, The Nerdist Way, argues this point really great, and it's something I never considered until I read that, was games can give you a sense of accomplishment and achievement because you've started from the game and you level progress, so that's a form of progression, but you can apply that to your everyday life. So you can look at the achievement you've done from one game to another, and it is a commitment to play a game, especially if you've got games now that can be 60 plus hours to finish. Dragon Age, I've easily played 60 hours of it since I've had it, so that shows you can be committed to something. Just like when you're in a board game scenario with a bunch of people, you can learn to be sociable, and you can learn to interact with people who you may not do on a regular basis, and open your mind, open your horizons, and you can apply that to your job and your everyday life, and bring people together as well, and you get to have bonds with people to the point of you can tell stories 2 years after they've happened, and it's never normally about the game you play, it's about what happened during the game, which is what makes them so appealing. So to clarify, to end, video games and board games are awesome. They bring people together. They're getting the sort of good natured stuff from what I can see that they deserve. Board games are getting as popular as ever, and rightly so, and video games are so important to me because they gave me the scope to get on, to know my siblings, to talk to my friends. It's an experience. It involves an emotional experience and fulfillment. And right now, as I'm ending this, I'm just about to go and play Elder Scrolls with two people who I never would have met without playing video games, and that's something that Twitch in particular makes a community of people. I play with an American from Chicago who I've never met, who's great, and a guy who lives not far from me in England that I've never met yet, but we play a game online together and every Sunday and have a great time. If that doesn't sum up the beauty of what video games can do and the experience they can give you, especially as they're getting as good as the great quality they are now, that they look like a film, it's really, really worth it. So I hope you've enjoyed me talking about how much video games mean to me, because when I grew up, the PC games like Jagged Alliance, I was a huge PC gamer, and it got me the opportunity to find out more about myself, to find out what I liked. The experiences is some of the experiences I still think about in terms of some games that have a profound effect, like Final Fantasy VIII, which is better than 7. Don't care what anyone thinks. And they're just phenomenal. And board games, like I say, or any form of games. I just touched on card games. I love playing blackjack and various other things, that they give you the feeling of involvement and inclusion. And if you are if you are excluding people from playing games with you, you need to seriously think about your attitude, and do start including people, because you might find that they're just like you and you might make a friend out of it. And I guess that's the best thing about games, is it improves your life, it improves your relationships, and opens your mind and possibilities to meet some really awesome people. So in the words of, I can't end this without saying, in the words of the great Will Wheaton, play more games, just like I'm about to now. I hope you like what you see. If you did, please do subscribe to us on Geek Apocalypse YouTube and on iTunes. We have a podcast that's nearly at 100 episodes, I can't believe, so hope you enjoy it. And they're really, really great and awesome. And yeah, please do support us. Share if you like. Share, like, subscribe, likey goodness. And I'll see you very soon for another edition of Hesse Vlog. Thanks. Bye. Play more games.